Looks like YouTube just went live.
Good morning, Commissioner Cook. Sounds like your mic is open.
Well,
that was me.
I'm sorry. Thought I had it closed, but
apparently you did. Sorry.
Yeah. Good morning, Commissioner Didier. You on?
Commissioner Didier.
Thank you. Karen, are we ready?
Give me 1 second here. All right, we are good to go.
All right. Looks like the clock is on, and it is 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning for November 10th, a regular board meeting. We have all three commissioners in our respected offices. Keith is on the phone at the commissioner's desk, and Karen is at the computer in the commissioner's office. So with that, we'll call it to order, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, justice for all. Thank you. With that, anybody that's got the agenda will see that public comment is by phone at 546-5859, and it's on the screen also. So go ahead and call in, and we'll take the calls as we can. So with that, we will move on to zone change 2020-01, the Columbia River West area. Derek, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is a request by Big Sky to rezone approximately 49.5 acres of land from RC5 to RC1. Derek, what PowerPoint are you talking about? There should be a PowerPoint you can see on the screen on YouTube.
On YouTube.
And then try to get these out to folks. Unfortunately, it came out late last night, so I apologize if you didn't get hard copies. Well, when did the hard copies come out? Because I haven't had a chance to look at any of this. It would have been this morning that you had the hard copy.
I sent it, I emailed this morning, Commissioner.
Oh. Must have been pretty recent. Probably about 8 o'clock.
7:20.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Are you on YouTube, Commissioner, or?
I'm working my way there, but go ahead and I'll catch up. Everything that is in the PowerPoint is, of course, in the packet as well. I apologize for the late delivery on the actual hard copy to follow along. The PowerPoint itself is in the packet? No. The information that's in the PowerPoint is the consolidation of. Yeah. Okay. That's the subjective analysis. I'll just go with it. Okay, I'm on. Thanks. And actually, one of those parcels is partially zoned. So the grand total area is going to be approximately 60 acres. That would become RC1. It's kind of a strange, the larger parcel's actually got a split zone in it to where about 15, 17 acres, something around there, is actually already RC1, and then the remainder of the 49.35 acres is RC5. practice. I can't speak to exactly why that line was drawn. Most likely, what I've noticed is that with farm unit boundary lines, sometimes those parcels have been split zone. We have a few out there, but yeah, I can't speak to as to why this particular one was done that way. I just know that that is the current zoning. The west, and I'll be able to show you on the map, and I'll point that area out. But there's a line, a red line, and there's this thin strip, and that section is actually RC1. It looks like it's part of another long, thin, separate long, thin parcel, but it's actually part of the larger parcel. It just happens sometimes when people are drawing the lines, or there could be other reasons. An applicant may have desired two different uses on the property. It's just not really good planning practice, and it can create problems when it comes to the actual development.
Yeah, my understanding was that actually violates GMA, but maybe you have more expertise in that, and we'll defer on that for now.
Yeah, it's definitely never to be done intentionally. Let's put it that way. The property is 3 parcels. And it's located east of the Columbia River Road and north of the Esquattle Drainage Canal. And just south of Sagemore Road. So it's up in that where Sagemore hits the river and then starts turning south and then turns into Columbia River Road. It's right in that area. Next slide, please. As mentioned, 49.35. It's comprised of 3 parcels. Oh wait, that's the same one. Did I repeat? There you go. So this is a Vicinity Map. As you can see, Sagemore to the south, or north of me. Columbia River Road. It's kind of front on Columbia River Road.
It's not showing on YouTube.
That's not showing on YouTube?
No.
It should.
Yeah, because I'm seeing it.
Well, it must have locked up then. I'm still down at request rezone approximately 49.35.
It's locked on the slide behind.
Yeah.
I'm seeing an image that says subject properties with the yellow parcel and arrows.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to shut down and start over, I guess, so. Go ahead.
Bob, I had to refresh my YouTube earlier because it was just spinning, and then I refreshed it and it caught up fine. So that should be a problem with YouTube today.
All right. I will do the same thing. Thank you.
So in this drawing here, or this map here, you see just to the east, just to the west, I apologize, just to the west of the yellow, you see this thin strip. That's actually part of that property. That's the parcel I was talking about. That's actually got the split zone. So everything to the west is RC1. Next slide, please. So, as mentioned, 61 acres total when looked at the whole. However, only 49.35 acres is what's being requested to rezone because the remainder is already RC1. The rural shoreline development, it's rural community 5 is the zoning. There are no mapped critical areas, but there probably are some slopes potentially. And then there's proximity to the Esquattle Canal. So this is
a critical area by virtue of slope exist only when it's identified and mapped.
Yes, unless we see it on site to where it was missed or something like that. But generally, yes, that is the case. That if it's not mapped, then we don't have really those maps have been developed by the folks that know where all those slopes are and can make that determination.
And what is the degree of slope before we consider it critical?
15% slope.
Okay. And this ground, you said those folks, who are those folks that?
I'm sorry, like, what happens when we do a critical areas ordinance is we hire various, like, for example, biologists to deal with the flora and fauna, geologists to look at the slope.
This land has been properly surveyed, and those persons engaged by the county to do that work did not document any critical areas by virtue of slope.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, weird. Mine's all fuzzy weird too. Here's the current zoning map. Again, it's a little closer. That RC1 portion, that's actually part of the overall parcel. And then the surrounding is RC5 to the south, RC1 to the north. There's a concomitant agreement on the RC1 properties to the north, a 2 acre minimum.
You just referred to, it's a minimum 2 acre parcel size, and what's the underlying zoning? Okay.
And that's the properties to the north there. The RC1 zone properties. And then here's some site pictures. It's primarily under orchard, but there's also large areas that are kind of the scrub steppe that we have. It's a mix. And then next slide's more. These shots are down by Columbia River Road. Next slide, please. So as you can be seeing, various view lots, but it goes back far. And like I said, it's a mix primarily of either land under orchard or more of this steppe type of territory. RC5, we've already discussed that. Minimum lot size for the current zoning is 5 acres. The proposed zoning will reduce that down to an allowance of 1 acre. It is consistent with the comprehensive plan designation of rural shoreline development, which is intended for large lot residential development along the shoreline. And therefore, because of an increase in density, it would be a more intensive use of the land. If it were future subdivision, you could get more lots out there, more residential density. Next slide.
Hey, Derek, before you go any further, that last comment you made, I'd like you to remember that when we get to a discussion of the supplemental page on the SUPA.
Okay. So the density increases, the number of allowed uses is less in the RC1. Both allowed for single family. Folks can do gardening or anything like that. They can have animals within the standards allowed for the parcel that they have, but it's limited. And whereas in the RC5, the intensity of residential density would be higher. However, the allowed uses would be less intense, potentially, under an RC1 designation. So the request is consistent with the surrounding areas, primarily single-family residential or vacant land or orchard. And the RC1 district is designed for rural residential environment, permitting one dwelling per unit. It is rural shoreline, and it's also Columbia River West, so there's kind of double designated, like, it's been long the intention of the county that this area develop for large lot residential. So it meets with those comprehensive plan and other concepts.
And large lot is
Large lot is rural lot development, 1 acre or larger.
subject properties that are RC5, is that correct?
Correct. There's a strip of RC5 to the north and then to the south. But that strip of RC5 to the north, if I recall correctly, is actually between RC1 as well. Let me double check that. Right. Well, some of it, yeah, mostly that to the off the north.
I know where it is.
Okay, yeah, that's RC5, and to the south is RC5.
Right. So some of the land in there is RC5 and some is RC1.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. I just noticed it in the record. I didn't see the repeated notices or call outs of the adjacent RC1 property, but I didn't recall seeing references to the fact that there's adjacent RC5 as well. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Thanks, guys.
Derek, what page are you on?
I was going to say I just went the other direction, and I apologize, I forgot to number these. It's the
Comments?
Yeah, I'm not in the comments.
You're still at notes?
No, I need to go. This is right where we need to be. Up. Okay, one more slide to comment.
Okay.
There we go. So at the time of the hearing, we had received one public comment letter. There was concern that this was inconsistent with the countywide planning policies, that consistent with the intended buffer in the county's plan, and there was concern that there was a potential for conflict of interest. These comments were also reiterated at the hearing, along with others who spoke. Primarily, again, these comments were reiterated. There was also a concern, not so much that the party was against the proposal, but that maybe now was not the time due to concerns of school impacts, roads, traffic, and water availability. Yeah, so that's pretty much a summary of the comments received from the public. It was mostly concerned as expressed there.
These comments raise a number of questions. What is your preference for timing? Do you want to address these now within the record, or do you want me to bring them up later?
I believe that if it's a question regarding, I think it should be in the record. The response.
No, everything that we discussed today has to be from the record. I'm not asking you to go outside the record. I'm asking you, do you want to address these issues now or later in our discussion this morning? I'm going to ask you about them. I'm just asking you when you want to be asked. At your preference. Okay, well, let's do some of them now, and we'll do some of them later then.
Okay.
The concern is that it's inconsistent with the revised Franklin County-wide planning policy. I'm assuming that you would not have brought this forward if you agreed with the fact or the statement that it is in conflict.
That is correct.
Okay, and what about with respect to being consistent with the Growth Management Act and specifically the GMA requirements for urban sprawl issues?
Again, same thing. This area is designated under our comp plan for 1 acre or even theoretically RS20, but it's not really consistent with the area up there.
Understand.
And that's an executive plan, so.
Okay. Next question, with respect to rezoning requests made by an entity who doesn't own the land, a landowner can designate a representative to serve as applicant. Is that correct? And is that what's happened here?
Yeah. The ownership interest of the property should not have bearing on my decision. It's common to have agents or hire agents to do it for you.
Can I apply to have someone else's property rezoned?
Or if you've signed off as them being your agent, and I have the documentation that shows
Okay, so that was the part of my question you didn't answer, which was,
Sorry.
Is it by an agreement where the landowner has designated a representative to serve as their designated representative and be an applicant? I'm just taking this right out of the record for this particular issue.
Yeah.
And I want clarity because we have a constituent who, by virtue of these comments, has expressed concern that that's an improper practice, and I just want to put sunlight on the fact that you're telling us that that the landowner doesn't have to be the applicant; they can designate a representative, and they've done that in this case. That's my understanding. So if any of that's wrong, just correct me. If not, we'll move on to the next.
That's correct.
Okay. And it says that rezoning these parcels is inconsistent or not consistent with the buffer intended in the county's plan. As I look at the maps and I look at the record, it does appear that this would create an RC5 immediately adjacent to an AP20, where currently the RC5 serves as a buffer between RC1 to the west and AP20 to the east. Mm-hmm. So, in your judgment based on the record, is there an intended buffer between that AP20 land and this residential development land?
Not that I was able to find in the text of the comp plan or anything like that. And also, if you go farther south, it's really quite common to see RC1 abutting AP20. It's not uncommon at all.
Right. Probably. Well, I want to stick with the record. There are references in the record to this issue and this concern. So I think I can speak to, while there may not be anything in the comprehensive plan that precludes or prohibits it, it is something that would logically, or in the plan, needs to be addressed or has been addressed with respect to potential impacts either on farm practices in the AP20 or on the residential environment by having those adjacent to one another. So speaking from the record, have we addressed that concern in the record?
You're talking about the RC1 being right up against the AP20 or potential farm activity.
Right, because go ahead. In the SEPA, this is one of the things that is anticipated and needs to be addressed. And in the supplement, I'm sure you know all this, but in the supplement, there is a responsibility to even look to. Let me find the language here to make it more precise. When you're talking about non-project actions, when answering the questions, you have to be aware of the extent of the proposal, and this is where it is relevant, or the types of activities likely to result from the proposal, meaning downstream effects, either activities directly resulting from the rezone or would affect the item at a greater intensity or a faster rate than if the proposal were not implemented. So, again, reading from the record, it seems that development is much more likely to occur from or following a rezone action than it would if it wasn't rezoned. Do you agree with that from the record?
That it's more likely to develop under an RC1 than an RC5?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We can come back to the other stuff. I don't want to drill too deep on that right now, but that'll become relevant later when we get into the supplemental sheet CEPA Q&A.
Okay.
And the last one, number 4, I can't read it in part because the public comments flag is covering up some of the text. But it says that multiple members of the Planning Commission who are or work with developers have a conflict of interest in this case. Is there anything from the record that would give rise to, in your opinion, a reasonable person with respect to potential conflicts?
Not in this case. There are no landowner interests or anything like that in that area at this time.
Okay. And no indications of any intent or desire for involvement in future development activity?
Not that I'm aware of. We do have developers and builders on our planning commission, which is pretty standard for a planning commission to have.
No, I understand that, and I'm trying to stick to the record here, asking you if you see anything in the record that gives rise. I mean, we can, but we're not going to have discussions about what people might or might not think. We're obliged to stick to the record. So there's nothing in the record that you see that would indicate or substantiate a concern for a conflict?
Only because I can't speak to the future. You know what I mean?
No, I'm asking you to speak to the record. Are you saying
no, there's
anything
nothing
in the record
at this time.
Okay. Can you speak to the reservations that are highlighted in the Planning Commission meeting minutes, where one of the Planning Commission members, Mr. Vincent, expresses a desire not to have any conditions on the rezone? Now, unfortunately, the Planning Commission meeting minutes are quite vague, and in fact, it's an issue we can address later, but we're going to need more detail for situations like this. It simply says that they express the desire not to have conditions, and then it just says that you spoke to it, but it doesn't tell us what you said. Now, because the entirety of the Planning Commission meeting is part of this record, I need to now ask you, what were the reasons cited for not wanting conditions, and what was your response?
You're talking about like concomitant agreement was, if I recall correctly, was the discussion as to whether or not to have that included. And it was based on the idea that the property is RC1. Therefore, you should have a right to utilize the full density of the property.
Except that that's not the case on RC1 property immediately north and adjacent to this parcel.
Because the applicant there was not an issue for the applicant. From what I recall of the record on that one, that was something that they presented as the owner of the property or the subdivider. It was not dictated to them. In this case, we would be potentially, again, it's one thing so that's really what it comes down to is RC1, if we put a concomitant agreement unilaterally onto the property, it's not allowing the party to exercise the zone and what their density rights are.
So the question was, what were the considerations or I'm trying to stick very tightly to the record here and not assume anything. it's pretty clear from the meeting minutes that there was a desire expressed not to have conditions applied, and you have intimated, but you didn't say that a concomitant agreement for larger minimum lot size was one of the objections. Was that one of the conditions under consideration that was being opposed?
Yes, as stated in the minutes, Commissioner Lank had asked about, what do y'all think about, having discussion about recommendation on a concomitant agreement, and then basically.
I read those minutes and I didn't see that, so.
Commissioner Lank asked about making a recommendation on a concomitant agreement now. Mr. Broughton explained.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And that's what I explained, was there was at this point in time no.
So I'm not asking about what Mr. Lank proposed or didn't propose. I'm asking what was the basis and what were the conditions that Mr. Vincent was opposed to, and I understand you're telling me that one of those, so he was responding to Mr. Lank?
Correct.
Okay. Were there other conditions, potential conditions that were addressed by Mr. Vincent?
Not that obviously. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, you commented on them in the meeting. You don't recall what the other concerns were?
You're talking about what Mr. Broughton, it says Mr. Broughton explained. Right. And that's what I was talking about. When Commissioner Lank brought up the concomitant agreement, I articulated that there's nothing here that would need that.
Yeah. No, you explained that one fine. I'm asking if there were other things besides concomitant agreement.
Not that I recall.
Okay. You can see how that might be important at this stage.
Oh, yes, I do.
and therefore why maybe a little bit more detail in the Planning Commission meeting minutes would be appreciated. Okay. I'll let you get back to your PowerPoint. Obviously, you can anticipate more questions.
Huh? Okay, can we see next slide? So these are standard, pretty relatively standard public works comments. Just any new lots have to get another access permit. Any mitigation fees will be determined once we know what it is that they're actually doing. Because just because it's RC1, they could go, bigger lots, smaller lots, just develop half of it. It's not likely, but it's possible. Next slide. In general, on the rezones, I do find that the comments get a little bit more intense at time of development of the property. These are kind of general because it's unknown the specifics yet if the property even will get developed. So you see here, basically Big Bend, nobody really had any comments. Bureau of Reclamation, of course, be aware of the canal. Those types of, but no overall concerns, just noting assets in the area that they needed to make sure that they didn't interfere with. So, you can see at the March 10th meeting, the Planning Commission provided a recommendation to approve based on the following 5 suggested findings of fact and 3 suggested conditions of approval. And we've already articulated a lot in our kind of discussion, but specifically, it is in accordance with the goals and policies of the comp plan. The intent of RC1 is to allow for these types of developments with large lots and expansive yards. And it's supported by the comprehensive plan, by it being a river shoreline area, and would be considered proper implementation of the plan. So there's no conflict there. There won't be material detrimental, consistent with surrounding areas. There's already a couple parcels there that are less than 5 acres, which will be corrected, and those will bring those in. Those are non-conforming approved lots, but there's merit and that the rezone implements the comp plan. And then there are conditions imposed in order to mitigate any significant adverse. Most of those are going to come out in detail later at time of development of the property, because until such time there really is no impact. And there's no concomitant agreement required. So conditions of approval, they'll need to comply with all their development regulations.
Excuse me, Eric.
Yep.
You just said there's no concomitant agreement required.
That's the recommendation.
But you're suggesting or clearly stating that the Planning Commission could have imposed one if they chose.
They could have recommended it, yes.
Thank you for the clarification. They could have recommended it. Because earlier you suggested that the only reason that a concomitant agreement for 2-acre parcels on the RC1 north of this site was because the applicant proposed it. And it gave the impression, I think, certainly to me and probably everybody listening, that short of the applicant asking for that, that wasn't to happen. But now I'm hearing you say that no, in fact, the Planning Commission could recommend it and this board could approve it. Is that accurate?
Yes and no, because you can run into some problems with when a body requires somebody to do an R2, it could be considered construed as a taking or something like that along those lines. It can set up conflict.
I don't know how it would be a taking if it's more permissible than the current zoning.
And it has to do with the fact that you actually are putting a designation of RC1 on it, saying that you can do it except for you can't, but the guy next door can. And I'm just saying that can create a potential for a takings claim. Whether or not you're going to win, that's a different story. But
I understand. And certainly there'd have to be a substantiating reason, like speaking from the record, there's AP20 adjacent on the east side, and if the board felt it appropriate for a buffer, which was also discussed in the record, that something like a concomitant agreement recommended in the Planning Commission by one of the Planning Commission members would be a lawful option, being as Planning Commission members would be a lawful option, being as it's substantiated by the desire for a buffer.
Thank you. That's a much better way of putting it. Basically, what would happen is if the board or the body can justify that restriction for a rational reason like that, then yes, you're going to have a better, or for health and safety reasons or various other things. Those would be the times when generally a unilateral application would be most appropriate.
Okay. Again, speaking from the record, was there anything in the record or in the meeting that gave you to believe that one or more members of the Planning Commission who produced this recommendation were interested in or favored a concomitant agreement for a lot size other than the 1 acre minimum? Obviously, Mr. Lank has raised the question. I'm looking to find out how much interest or discussion there was around that
It was pretty limited. I think he brought it, my recollection, he brought it up. There was some discussion about it, but there wasn't really, it wasn't a very long discussion. And I think it was Commissioner Vincent kind of explained, why he didn't think that it would be a right idea, and then they just kind of moved on.
And what were the reasons Mr. Vincent gave for thinking it wasn't a right idea to use your
He just didn't feel comfortable with putting additional constraints on a property that the other properties around it didn't have, other than to the north.
Okay. Anybody else in the meeting speak to it or express any?
Not that I recall.
Okay, great. Let's move on. Thanks.
So again, any subdivision or future development would have to apply to or adhere to any of our development regulations, 16, 17, 16 subdivisions. So it would need to be laid out, designed, and processed appropriately, meet the zoning requirements, meet all the environmental requirements. And of course, it would have to comply with state, local, and federal law or agency standards. And then there would have to be access and potentially mitigation fees depending on the overall impact or design of the subdivision if it should occur. So most of those are going to come out in the actual at the time of development regarding the property.
Including any critical areas by virtue of slope that might be subsequently identified, correct?
Correct. Yep. Like sometimes we have on plats where it'll be like lots 3, 7, and 42, have to have compaction or have to have this or that because it's a site-specific issue. Lot-specific, I should say. And then, I guess next slide. There's no questions. And this is the recommended motion based on the Planning Commission recommendation. And that's
So Derek, I was looking to capture those conditions. Can you just summarize the two of them for me since we're past that slide?
There's 3 total. One is they must, future development shall comply with the county development regulations.
Right.
Future development at this site shall comply with local, state, and federal agency standards. And then road and access, future development.
I got them.
Okay.
Yep, thanks. I read them before. I just thought I missed them.
Sorry. So, and that's the end of the PowerPoint presentation. And of course, Mr. Stromstad is the agency or the agent, so he's available for questions as am I.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I've got additional questions, but I've been, I think, doing a bit and see if anybody else has questions before I spend any more time.
I have no question.
I just have a comment. As everybody's aware, our own minutes for our meetings are basically summarized. So if anybody wants a direct quote on the minutes, they should require a verbatim set of minutes. We spent a lot of time today on wondering if what was said. So I can say our own minutes.
Respectfully, Mr. Chairman, I would point out this is a quasi-judicial matter, and the record becomes critically and legally important. And I would be more than happy if we wanted to table this and get the audio recording as opposed to spending time asking Mr. Botten questions. Because if we don't address those subtleties, we leave the door open for challenges to any action that the board takes. So I hope you realize that all of the questions asked were for an express purpose of avoiding downstream complications and litigation. That's my intent, is to do that. I get that our minutes are necessarily summarized, but in this particular case, and in the future, I'd ask that Mr. Broughton maybe review those and refresh before coming in, because probably enough on that.
Yeah.
So if it's appropriate, I have a note. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, if it's appropriate, I'll hit some of my other questions now.
Please.
Okay, Derek, with respect to how your department is processing this application, that process is different than a special use permit, say, or a conditional use permit. This is a rezone application, and so you received public comment on this proposal.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
With respect to the record and complying with the law, should the board regard the public comments and testimony the same in this case as we would if this were a special use permit application?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You're acquainted with the appearance of fairness doctrine?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So it is clear from the record that a number of citizens potentially, and certainly one citizen, has concerns about members of the Planning Commission participating in this based on past land use interests. In fact, I recently recused myself from a land use discussion because I had a conversation about possibly purchasing land adjacent to a site under consideration. I bring that up because in the record, one of the members of the Planning Commission was a recent owner developer of land adjacent to this site. So I think the citizens bringing that issue to light was entirely appropriate. And I think under the appearance of fairness doctrine, well, I would have immediately recused myself. Everybody has their own threshold. But I'm bringing this up and putting light on it because it appears from my discussion with you that there was really only very limited concern about, let me rephrase, there was only concern from a potential conflict of interest issue with one of the Planning Commission members. I didn't hear or see anything that suggested a majority would potentially be conflicted. And the reason that that's relevant is because, again, from the record based on the vote, it was a unanimous vote. So even if one or two or even three Planning Commission Planning Commissioners had recused themselves, it doesn't appear that it would have changed the recommendation and decision. So I wanted to speak to that because it is in the record that citizens had concerns about the failure to recuse themselves. I don't want to get off the record. I was going to issue an opinion about what I thought they should have done, so I'm not going to go there. In the SEPA document, in Section B, which is the supplemental sheet for non-project actions, it again talks about when answering the questions in SEPA that you have to be aware of the extent of the proposal or the types of activities likely to result from the proposal. Now, when it says or the types of activities likely to result from the proposal, is it very narrowly speaking to types of activities likely to result from the actual rezone, or types of activities likely to result as a result of the proposal? In other words, is that to say that the probable future development, which you earlier said was in fact probable by virtue of this action, is the SEPA intended to consider the development of that property and its impacts here? Is that what that sentence is saying? If you want, I'll go back and read it again.
Yeah, no, I've got it right here. Generally speaking, in my experience has been, yeah, the CEPAs are specific to the proposal. So this is a rezone. There's no guarantee of development. It's probable and possible. But at the time of development, especially for a subdivision, there will be another CEPA issued that will fill in and be more detailed. Often the response is, as opposed to not applicable, it's more a matter of not known at this time, will be determined at time of specific development.
Right. Okay, well, I appreciate that and understand that I'm not asking these questions to drive an agenda. I'm asking them to provide enlightenment for parties on both sides of this issue. Read narrowly, the types of activities likely to result from the proposal could be its subsequent development. But the fact that there is another CEPA, if and when it is to be developed, I think speaks to that. So thank you for that clarification. Mm-hmm. We've already talked about critical areas. Actually, that last discussion enabled me to skip past about a half a dozen questions. So good job. Inclusion in the rural shoreline area doesn't guarantee any right to rezoned RC1, correct?
That is correct.
Merely identifies it as an allowable if the process approves it, correct?
Correct. RC1 does not conflict, but it's not a guarantee.
Okay. Would you say that and again, we're always speaking from the record, would you say that this farmland is low or poor quality, or is this quality farmland?
I honestly can't speak to that because I'm not a farm guy. I just don't know that information. Perhaps the applicant. My assumption is if the landowner is desiring to get it off the farm and develop something else, then it's just not working for them. And that,
understand that GMA takes a different view of that, and I know you do understand that.
Yeah.
But I think this also can be addressed on the basis of a subsequent CEPA. So I'm gonna keep moving.
Okay.
And you've already addressed it. In fact, there is some RC5 adjacent to this property that it was only very tangentially mentioned in the record, almost read like it was being suppressed, that was there. In 8B of the CEPA, my read is it's borderline disingenuous to suggest that no farmland would be converted as a result of this action. And I suppose that's technically accurate because this is a paperwork function of changing the zoning, but it's functionally questionable because clearly there is current agriculture taking place on that ground that if this were to be developed, which is something you said is likely, probable, then there would be a conversion to farmland. But I'm hearing you again say that will be addressed in the subsequent CEPA.
Also, my understanding is that farmland is in the process of being removed. Independent, but I could be wrong on that. I might be mistaking that for another property. But the agent may speak, Mr. Strong may be able to speak to that matter a little better than I.
I don't think I need to because of the chain of events that we've already addressed with respect to the secondary CEPA and what may or may not happen.
Okay.
And yeah, I'm getting close to the end here, you bet. I can skip those. In the conditions of approval, items 1 and 2 are static. Those are a given, right? We do that on virtually every one of these?
Correct.
Okay. In fact, I can't imagine us approving something out of this record that didn't comply with our county development standards and requirements.
It would be an issue for sure.
It sure would. And one final time, you don't recall any of Mr. Vincent's other objections about conditions?
No. I mean, again, the original issue was that back in the day when this property was under review for a rezone, he had a project in the area or property or something like that. That's no longer the case and hasn't been. And staff did check records, and there's no ownership interest of any of the staff members in that, commissioners in that area that we were able to find.
Okay, and with respect to this record, this proposal, and the rules, laws, regulations applying to this issue before us, is there anything that precludes a member of the Planning Commission from subsequently participating in the development of lands being rezoned?
I'm not aware of a legal prohibition regarding that. However, there could be some issues with regarding whether or not they'd be able to stay on the Planning Commission or various other things. I don't believe being a planning commissioner basically makes it so that you're not allowed to, if your business is developed, construction, you would be in a bid process against other parties. So I'm not aware of anything under my authority that would be able to prohibit a party from doing such things.
Okay, and clearly I think we all understand, and it's evidenced in this record, that it's not uncommon to have developers on the Planning Commission, given the expertise and experience that they can bring to some of these issues. All of us, commissioners included, sometimes have to be extra careful about our involvements. And to keep this relevant to the record, I'll say that the planning commissioners probably need to do that as well, because of the requirement to maintain an appearance of fairness and to avoid even the perceptions of conflict of interest. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Didier, any questions?
No question.
With that, I would entertain a motion for ordinance number 05-2020.
Mr. Chairman, I move for ordinance 05-2020 for approval.
Okay. Is there a second?
My phone is off of mute. I will second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Thank you, Derek.
Thank you. I'm going on mute now unless there's questions.
All right. Thanks. With that, we will move on our agenda to pay the bills. I've only seen one voucher this morning.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just flipping to the right page here. I've seen one fiscal note this morning. It is fund expenditures. Move for approval of those fund expenditures dated November 10, 2020, in the total amount of $1,468,159.70.
I second.
Okay. And for the record, the voucher that I have in front of me does have Keith's review signature on it also. So, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right. With that, consent agenda, we have quite a number of them this morning, 1 through 12.
Mr. Chairman, move for approval of consent with discussion. Actually, let me rescind that. I would like to pull a couple of items for separate discussion and consideration. Those would be item 12. And actually, I think the other one I can keep in the consent. So move for approval of consent items 1 through 11 and request that item 12 be separated for a separate discussion.
I second.
All right. All in favor on consent agenda 1 through 11?
Aye.
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 Okay, we'll move on to resolution 2020-261, extension of the City of Pasco ground lease. Discussion.
Okay. Keith, you hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This particular one has got some real tentacles to it. And I wanted to get a few clarifications. First, I read all the material and the contract, which was lengthy to say the least, and colloquial in its writing from the 1990s. That was originally a 20-year lease, and it started at the time, as I recall, of the completion or reasonable completion of the facilities themselves, which caused it to be some years later. I forget, I think it was about 6 years after the original contract was let. The contract is now at the 20-year point, and the 5-year extensions are only by mutual agreement, and there's 2 of them. So we would be committing for another 5 years. First question, of the 30 or 31 acres, that is the what we know as the ball fields, the softball fields, and the soccer fields on the east side of Giesa Stadium, right? Does it also include the land under Giesa Stadium?
No, this is just for the ball fields that are kind of south of the main Hapo Center complex. I don't. Your memory of this is going to be better than mine, but I did not think this included the soccer fields. I thought those were already owned by the city, but I could be wrong about that.
Well, I did too, until I saw that it was 31 acres, and that seemed substantially more than just the ball fields. And it makes reference to development, and I thought it specifically made reference to development of soccer fields. And I apologize, I should have printed this 64-page beast and highlighted it. Is this, let me preface it this way. I don't want to suggest that I'm encouraging a change in ownership of, excuse me, the Hapo Center. But hypothetically, if we were to look at selling, leasing, or making some change with Hapo Center, we'd want to do this particular action with some foresight. We can essentially cancel this lease with the city. It takes a 2-year notice, as I recall from the contract. I forget where it's in there, but there's a 2-year notice requirement. Do we have any, and I guess this is for anyone who wants to speak to it, anyone have any concerns about tying up this ground going forward? Our revenue on it is $1 a year. It's not like we're benefiting from it financially. We do lease or have a lease agreement of some kind with the Franklin County Museum with the city, it's almost a reciprocal where they own the land and we lease it at, I think, $1 a year as well, but we maintain it and maintain the costs and such, just as they do with the ball fields. I guess now that I've kind of walked through it mentally, I don't so much have a concern as just wanting to make sure that because this was such an extensive contract and because it has the potential to impact our ability to change the use of Hapo Center or surrounding lands in the future, that there ought to be some discussion of it beyond just being on the consent agenda.
Sure. If I may, Commissioner, it looks like as I review some of the detail under section 4.1, it does include the space for the soccer fields. So I want to correct the record on that particular question. But also in section 5.
Could you give me a page number, please?
Certainly. That's page 11 of the original agreement.
Okay.
And then on page 13 begins Article 5. The city of Pasco has been granted the right of first refusal, and section 5.2, an option to purchase, located on page 14. So in the event that the county were to decide to make a change in ownership of the facility or property, that this agreement is subject to. So,
Yeah. Now, if we were to opt not to pursue the clause for 5-year extension by mutual agreement, it doesn't appear that that would kick in that right of first refusal because the contract has run its term and the extensions are by mutual agreement. Is that a logical interpretation of that?
I believe so, yes.
So then really we are kind of at a point in time where if there was thought or interest of a change of ownership in Hapo, executing this would delay that 5 years, well, minimum 2 years, and then there would be a first right of refusal, which could, I suppose, could play into a sale opportunity, but at that point it gets so hypothetical that it's probably not a real concern. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I think I'll just say I appreciate the opportunity to highlight some of the thoughts and concerns that I had about it. I think I'm okay with going ahead and approving it unless other members of the board have concerns, which if they do, I'd love to hear them. Thanks.
Yeah, after reading through it, I somewhat expected this to be coming sooner than later. I wasn't aware of exact dates on it, but so I have not a problem with it.
Yeah, and I have heard rumor, by the way, that the city has been looking for other ground for soccer fields, and that would raise a bunch of issues about the first right of refusal and what the ground subsequently might be used for or sold for. But the contract does say that if they executed that and we were required to sell it to them, it would be at fair market value. So it's just to resolve any perceptions. It's not a case where the city could buy it from the county at a bargain price and then market it for a profit. Not that they would do that, but the contract requires, if they execute their first right, that it's at fair market value. So thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, on this topic, I also wanted to pull this for discussion. For clarification reasons, it says that this is the first of 5-year periods, correct? Keith, I guess I should be asking you.
Yes, under paragraph 1.2, which is on page 4, it says the parties may extend the lease by mutual written agreement for consecutive renewal periods of 5 years each, the first period commencing upon the expiration of the 20-year term, and that would be this one. and the second period commencing upon the expiration of the first period, and so forth. So,
And Keith, if I may, the reference to 2 that I made was that at any point with 2 years' notice, we can notify the city of our intent to end the lease. So Commissioner Didier is correct about the 5 years, but effectively it's 2 years because that's our notice to the city if we want to close it out.
And Keith, it says here on the contract that the lease expired November 6th, so it is no longer in place. It is expired.
that's correct. As of this week, it would have expired.
Now, it looks like, reading through this contract, that it looks like we worked with the city to allow them to put this in and charged them a $1 lease. Is that correct? Because I couldn't even find a sum of money in this whole lease agreement. I looked through it and I could not find what lease monies we're getting out of this. At this point in time, with the city utilizing this ground, what is very valuable, I think at a point this time, we should use this as a point to maybe receive some lease money or work with the city on the fact that our developers down in the donut hole aren't able to get water without all of these contingencies that they're throwing on them. We should use this as some leverage to help our developers down in the donut hole.
Well, I will just say this clearly was made, the agreement was made a number of years ago. I can only speculate to some degree as to the circumstances in which the county agreed to these terms with the city. And a little bit of that speculation, I believe, is based on the idea of the county recognizing the economic benefit to the community as a result of having these sports fields available. They host a number of tournaments that bring in people regionally and nationally. That was intended as part of the mission of the HAPO Center to fill hotels, to generate revenue for restaurants. And there was an expectation or a belief at the time that this benefited the entire county and community financially as a result of having this space available for public sports fields. The specifics of whether, the city should pay the county a fee for the use of that, I suppose is a relevant consideration. But at the time that this was first negotiated, I believe the intent was not to necessarily generate profit for the county, but make this available for developing businesses along the Road 68 corridor. And it was located in such a way that it would be convenient for these youth soccer leagues and others, softball and baseball fields to do that, to kind of fulfill that economic development piece of the mission. So
Keith, in your description there, can you enlighten anybody that might be listening what percentage of the tax on the motel hotels that the county gets?
Well, directly, it's, I think, I don't have the exact percentage numbers. I want to say it's a small percentage, but.
All I'm saying is the city's coming out the winner on that.
As a business entity, I'm sure the city benefits more than the county does in direct dollars. I don't disagree with that. But the county also does get some benefit from hotel, motel tax, car rental taxes, restaurants, those kinds of things in the area.
Yeah, when you see that ball field's full all summer with tournaments from people from out of town, and when they have soccer tournaments, there's not a vacant spot at any place on that soccer field. So
exactly,
it's a generator.
Yes. But we are holding the short end of that generated tax revenue, and I think that the city ought to be sharing some of that with us now that we've allowed 26 years, 6 years for development, 20 years of free gratis to build this growth of money that is generated, but we're not receiving our fair share of it, I don't think.
Mr. Chairman, is there a resolution number under consideration this morning?
There is 2020-261.
I would note that every person that comes here for a soccer tournament or a softball tournament doesn't just stay in the hotels. They also shop in our grocery stores, go to fast food, shop at Lowe's and other places. And the sales taxes that come off of that come back to the county, both in the 0.9% rebate back from the state on all of the sales tax dollars, as well as our own normal portion of the sales tax, which is small compared to what the city gets. But I would note that our financial health this year with COVID going into 2021 is really as good as it is for two reasons: the increased growth in our community, which means we've got more taxpayers, and the retail sales tax numbers, which appear to be quite good. So while Commissioner Didier is correct that the city gets the lion's share, we still do benefit both from the hotel, motel, what they call heads and beds, and also the retail sales tax. And because there is an opportunity to give this more detailed thought, and then with only 2 years' notice to the city make a change, I think it's appropriate to move for approval of Resolution 2020-261 as presented.
Okay. Is there a second? I will second. Any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think we're rushing into a 5-year agreement. As Commissioner Peck has presented, this is 31 acres of very valuable land. Very valuable land. And I would also like clarification on whether or not the baseball field is included in it. That seems to be a very lot, because it's 43,500 square feet in every acre. So there's a lot of square feet there in prime location. And I think we're rushing into a 5-year extension that we should probably look at a little bit harder.
So the ball fields are included in the contract in the property, and the contract gives us 2 years notice to the city. So we're not locked into 5-year.
Commissioners?
I say the ball fields, but I believe the semi-pro field is not.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. Geisa Stadium for the,
I meant the softball complex, sorry.
yeah. There are 4 youth baseball baseball fields that are directly south of the ice arena that are the ones that are included. The Geisa Stadium for the Tri-Cities baseball team is not included.
Right. Okay. So we have a motion on a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So noted. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to, unless there's a phone call, move on to your time.
Yes, we do have one caller on the line, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Good morning. Is this Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Good morning. You are in the commissioner's meeting room, and you have the floor for 3 minutes, please.
Okay, hold on. Let me, my earpiece on here. Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Hi, my name is Shelley Burt, and I just have a few comments. The first one is the CARES Act money. I know I have a 5-year-old with special needs, and I've been trying to get him into Boys and Girls Club since September, and he just is on a waiting list. And I know, we just need to know who got CARES Act money for childcare, and I would like it to be on the Benton County and the Franklin County website, both of them, so that the community knows where we can go to get some help for childcare. And also, I would like to request that they review, both the commissioners review the request for an advisory committee to replace Dr. Amy Persons, because we need some professionals, experts, doctors, local leaders, etc., to help guide us for back to school and opening our businesses. There's a major problem right now in the schools. You know, my son was 5 years old with special needs, needed a mask exemption, and the doctor signed it, sent it to Dr. Amy Persons, and she put a 30-day limit on it, and then added that she wanted the schools to include work with him to acclimate him to the mask. And so they did that without my permission and without permission from any of his doctors for 2 days, 5.5 hours each day. And it has adversely affected him. You know, he goes to Seattle Children's Psychiatry, and they did not recommend that he ever put a mask on. And since then, it's been weeks and weeks. He's only been able to attend maybe 3 hours of school. We had to transfer him schools. Oh, and, you know, it's just been a nightmare, if you want to know the truth. I don't know how we're going to be able to get him to go back to school. And, you know, I had already a citizen's complaint in with OSFI because the IDEA, he wasn't receiving a free and appropriate public education. And, you know, for them to correct this now, the district, because they were found in violation, he needs to go to school. But now he can't go to school because Dr. Amy Persons did that to him, making them, or letting them, allowing them to put a mask on him with the doctor saying no. So this needs to be addressed. I did send all the commissioners an email about this. I hope that they'll take this serious. And the other thing that is really important is the WHO, the World Health Organization, recommends that 5 and under do not wear a mask. So why are we forcing 5-year-olds to wear a mask? And when I talked, you know, with one of the investigators from the OSBI from the state about this, they said, well, you know, I don't even think we're recommending, the World Health Organization isn't recommending 5-year-olds wear a mask. I don't even think that's part of what OSBI is recommending. He said, I'm not sure, though, I'll get back to you. And so this is something that locally, you know, the commissioners, and if we had an advisory committee, they could address this, because in child care situations, the 5-year-olds don't wear a mask. So I think it should be optional in schools, because he also, part of his developmental delays is social, and he can't read social cues. And so when the kids are wearing masks, he's having a hard time knowing if people are mad at him or angry or sad or happy. And that's another major problem with him in schools right now. So thank you for listening. I think that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you for your comment.
There's no other calls, Keith. It's your time in the agenda.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I don't have any other calls at this point. And just briefly, the only thing I wanted to convey in administration office business was just kind of a general update on where we are in our CARES Act funding. As you know, we are currently under guidance that all of our CARES Act funding has to be allocated by November 30th. I think we're on target to do that. We are working with the various subrecipient organizations that we're running programs through. They are completing their applications. I am pretty sure we're pretty well completely finished with the TRIDEC piece. We're still working on child care, the utilities assistance, and the Tri-Cities Chamber and Pasco Chamber programs, but they're also getting close to having their funds distributed. With the outcome of the election last week, there is a potential of changes to the program between now and the end of November that could either extend that deadline or perhaps allocate additional funds for the county, but that's purely speculation at this point. So we're operating under the current guidelines and expect to be able to have everything completed by November 30th, and then have our complete report to the Department of Commerce by the middle of December. So with that, we received a number of appreciative letters from business owners. We've also had some questions and concerns that we're working through and answering those questions. But so far, we think we're on target to complete that in a timely way, as well as meet most of the requirements that the county itself as a business entity has incurred to deal with the shutdown and the COVID costs that we've incurred directly as a county. And we'll have a final accounting of those individual programs after we have completed them by the end of November. So certainly answer any questions that you may have that perhaps you heard from constituents, but that's essentially where we are right now. So with that, that's all I had this morning, Commissioners.
Keith, this is Commissioner Didier. Will we get a complete breakdown of all the monies that we distributed to and the people that received them, or the organizations, and how they distribute them, or will we just get the money we gave to them?
We will have a complete listing of every grant recipient that received CARES Act funds.
Okay, but when we give it to TRIDAC and the other Pasco Chamber, will we get a breakdown of how they spent our money, or?
Yes, we will have a report from each of them as to which businesses or business owners received grant funding. So
okay.
It'll be down at that detail level.
So I'm hearing a radio ad out there about Franklin County is handing out $600,000. Is that CARES Act money paying for that radio ad?
No, not directly. I guess it would depend a little bit on which ad that is. We did provide some administrative costs so that they could advertise their programs. Without knowing exactly which group that is, it's hard to say, but.
No, it specifically says Franklin County.
Okay. We are not directly advertising those grants other than announcing those on our website, but so radio ads that are being purchased could be purchased by the individual subrecipient that we have allocated funds to. But within those programs, it specifies what they can and cannot use those funds for. And the bulk of their monies are directly related to business recovery. But within the administrative fees that they have charged they would be allowed to advertise or promote and make the public aware that those grants are available. So for example, let's use TRIDAC, for example. If they used a portion of their management fee to buy radio advertising or television advertising or bilingual translators, those kinds of things, that would be permitted under their grant.
Yeah, this is all in English. There's no bilingual out there. So that, of course, I'm not listening to the Spanish, but thank you, Keith.
Okay. Further questions for Keith this morning?
No questions.
All right. Anything further for the good of the board? Hearing none.
Mr. Chairman, just a note that there's a RRLF meeting on Thursday, which I bring it up because we haven't gotten a lot of interest in those loans in the last several months. So we'll be looking at one on Thursday. And that's it. Thanks.
All right. Any other comments for the board? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.